I'm Mallory Kaler with Economic Development here in the city of Portsmouth, and I have a team of folks who are going to talk through a couple of different incentive programs that we have here in Portsmouth. Again, we're going to go through the different incentive programs that we have. Many of them are tied to a specific geography in the city, so you may be in that geography and you may not, just depending on which incentive program we discuss. And so we'll have information on that so you can figure out if you're in that particular zone or not, depending on which incentive program we discuss today. Today's goal is to go over the Virginia Enterprise Zone program to include the state benefits and the local benefits, to discuss the Foreign Trade Zone program, to discuss the Port of Virginia Development Zone program, to discuss the local incentive program here in the city that is sponsored by the Economic Development Authority, and then to review the Federal Hub Zone program and the incentives that go along with that. Just want to make sure everybody is aware, we're all internet savvy now and everything's out on the web and printed materials are going out of style. All of this information is on the Portsmouth website under the incentive page. You'll see we have all the different zone programs listed, and you can click on that link and go to each one. We'll start off with the Enterprise Zone program, and just want to let you know this is a partnership with the state. It was originally established by the General Assembly in 1982. It's one of the best forms of state and local partnerships for generating investment in real estate and job generation. Any city or community or county may have up to 3 enterprise zones, and they are defined by a specific geography, and each of those geographies may then have 3 non-contiguous areas. Any one zone can consist of 7% of the city of Portsmouth's geography. Portsmouth is very fortunate. We have 2 state-designated enterprise zones, and I'll go through each. Some of the benefits and incentives are the same, and some are different because the geographies are different, and the program is tailored to the geographies and the industries and businesses in each of those zones. Our first zone went into effect in 2010, and our second zone went into effect in 2014. Each of these zones are good for at least a 10-year run with 2 5-year renewals, provided we do everything we're supposed to do. So in essence, and we get pretty good marks from the state on administering our program. So in essence, each zone should last 20 years and offer businesses and property owners in those zones as much as 20 years to take advantage of the program. Again, Zone 1 for the city of Portsmouth was established in 2010. It is primarily commercial areas with some limited industrial areas of the city. For the most part, it consists of the downtown to midtown area, the Victory area, and the Mass Center out along the city line. We amended it in 2012 and added additional geography to it that included the Virginia Avenue industrial corridor, the Elmhurst to Greenwood Park industrial area, and then some businesses and industrial area along Airline Boulevard. This is the geography that you see in yellow is Enterprise Zone number 1. Again, it starts from the waterfront here in downtown, picks up Port Center Commerce Park, carries out down High Street, picks up as you get out here to the Midtown area here, and then goes up Virginia Avenue and picks up this industrial area up there. It also out in Victory includes Victory Crossing Shopping Center, Victory Village, goes down again along Airline and picks up a couple of properties, goes down along Elmhurst and picks up all the industrial area off of Elmhurst and goes into Greenwood Industrial Park. And then it picks up the entire Mass Center portion that is on the Virginia side of the line. I might ask my speakers if you might be willing to step aside so some of our late arrivals might have a spot to sit, if you don't mind, if 1 or 2 of you could wiggle over. And I don't know, Toy, are there any chairs maybe we could get from our conference room?
I'm going to check.
Thank you. Going back to our website and those maps, if you have a question and want to know if your property or business is located in Enterprise Zone 1, you go to our website. So again, you go to the incentives page of our website and you go over here to these interactive maps and you click on interactive map for Enterprise Zone number 1. And you go, this is what will pop up. You go in under the magnifying glass and you have the opportunity to type in an address, select that address, and then the screen will refresh, and it will give you an indication if the property, for example, we're using this building today as the sample, is in Enterprise Zone 1, number 1, because it's within this yellow area here. Had the building popped up here, it would not be in Enterprise Zone number 1. So it is a very user-friendly way to track and confirm if you're in the enterprise zone, your property or business. If at any point in time you run into challenges with this, you can certainly call our office, and everybody on staff in our office can walk you through it or look it up for you and send you a screenshot. And there we go. I mentioned that we have 2 of these state designated zones. We're very fortunate. We're one of the few communities that have 2 across the Commonwealth. This second zone I mentioned went into effect in 2014 and covers an entirely different geography. That includes mostly industrial waterfront areas of the West Norfolk area, the Pinners Point PMT area, and the Paradise Creek Elm Avenue corridor area. So here you have the West Norfolk area to include all the industrial property here, to include the vacant BASF property, and to include all of this industrial property along the waterfront there. Then it includes, you see where Enterprise Zone number 1 ends here along the industrial area of Virginia Avenue, and Enterprise Zone number 2 picks up all of PMT and the adjoining industrial property here that's privately owned. And then it starts at Frederick Boulevard and 264 up here, goes all the way down Frederick and picks up this industrial and a little bit of commercial area along Frederick Boulevard. Thank you, Toy. And then comes all the way down Elm Avenue and down Burton's Point Road to pick up all the industrial property down here along the southern branch of the Elizabeth River. Again, similar to Enterprise Zone number 1, we have an interactive map on the web that you simply go to this link here where it says Zone 2, and you would pull up a similar screen. You would go to your magnifying glass, type in an address, select that address, and again, here's an example. We use the BASF site as the example there to give you an idea. If that property had shown up over here, you're not in the state designated enterprise zone. The way we talk about these various zones, we're talking about different incentives that are available to businesses or property owners located in the zone. That incentive could be anywhere from a grant, a loan, a rebate, an exemption, a program, a service, or anything like that to spur business development and spur investment in real estate. The state has 2 grants that run with both of these enterprise zones. They are the same incentives for both of those zones. They are the Real Property Investment Grant and the Job Creation Grant. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jordan Snelling, who runs the Enterprise Zone program for the state and is our contact for our 2 zones here in Portsmouth. And we're going to flip the screen and give out her handout.
Okay. I work with the Department of Housing and Community Development, and I run the Enterprise Zone for the state. So I work with Portsmouth zones and then the other 56 zones throughout the state. So today I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about, I won't talk too much about the program because I think Mallory touched on most of that, but I'll walk you guys through the 2 incentives, the Real Property Investment Grant and the Job Creation Grant. And anyone who's really dealt with the Enterprise Zone in the past knows it's a pretty technical program, and most of the program regulations are codified by the Code of Virginia or in regulations set by the General Assembly. So there are things that you should be very careful if you're interested in applying. Make sure you're reading the manuals and watching the presentations and really making sure that your business qualifies. And if anyone has any questions, you guys can stop me as we go. So I just kind of talked about that. As Mallory mentioned, the Enterprise Zone is a partnership between the state and the localities. And so in each Enterprise Zone, the state offers R2 incentives, but each locality offers their own set of local incentives that they can really gear towards their zone. And as Mallory mentioned, with the 2 different zones, they're able to really tailor those to fit the businesses that are within there and whatever they want to encourage in that area of the city. And so the programs that we administer are administered annually. And so we'll get into the timeline of things, but for the enterprise zone, particularly the state incentives, the timeline of when you do things is very important. We administer it manually, so we go by the calendar year. For the real property investment year, it's the calendar year in which your certificate of occupancy or your final permits are issued. So if anyone here got a CO or a final inspection in 2014, you would have to apply by April 1st of 2015, and there are no exceptions to that rule because it's determined by the General Assembly, and the allocation comes down to us from the General Assembly every year, and it's for only the investment that was made in that time period, so we don't have flexibility on changing that. And likewise, if you had a project that was completed in 2013, we can no longer consider that for this year. So that's just something to keep in mind. They are performance-based, so as I'm saying, it's retroactive. It's for everything that was completed in the previous calendar year. If you are a business that's creating jobs, each business has a base year, and so it's for jobs created over that base year. But it's still retroactive, so it's still referring to the jobs created or maintained in that calendar year before. So for the sake of today, we're going to refer mostly to everything that was done in 2014. And as I said, April 1st is kind of the drop dead date. That's very, very important because particularly now it's coming up very quickly. So if you're interested in enterprise zone and applying for a state incentive for this year, I would reach out to Mallory or myself as soon as possible so we can get you rolling.
And Jordan, if I can ask, if you have work that you're doing with respect to the real property investment grant and it carries over, it's a phased project and carries over, from one calendar year to the next, how do you bundle that together so that do you just look at it when it's all complete?
So it depends how you do that. If you have a multi-phase, and actually hold that thought because we'll get into that in 1 second. But that is a very important point that we'll touch on. We're actually going to go through the job creation grant first. So the job creation grant is available to businesses that are creating high-wage, full-time, and permanent positions that are net new to Virginia and also that get health benefits. So particularly in this area of the state, it becomes more important to pay attention to the net new to Virginia because we have more businesses that are moving around between Norfolk and Hampton, Portsmouth, and Newport News, and it has to be new to the state. You can't relocate from zone to zone or from out of a zone to into zone because you won't qualify. So the job creation grant is available, as I said, for jobs created over a base year. So any business can set a base year that's one of the 2 years preceding their first grant year. So what that means is if you are going to apply in the next 2 weeks for grant year 2014, your base year would be 2013 or 2012 for first-time applicants. If you're not a first-time applicant, your base year stays the same for the 5 years that you get the grant. The base year, as I mentioned, is one of those 2 years. So if you're a new business, your base year would be 0. And so what that allows you to do is if you were a new business in 2012, you don't have to apply for the first time until 2014, and then you get to capture that whole increment of new jobs. You don't have to take maybe a half a year if you started mid-year. This is very important. There is a 4-job threshold, so grants start actually on the 5th job, and we'll go into the calculations and how you kind of get into all of that. There are some ineligible businesses, local governments, any semi-governmental organizations, the EDA, IDA, Housing Authority, anything like that is ineligible. And nonprofits are actually also ineligible for the job creation grant. Nonprofits are not ineligible for the real property side of it. It's only for the job creation side of it. So we went through these a little bit, but we're going to talk about what a position has to have to be eligible for a grant. So it has to be net new to Virginia. As I mentioned, the regulations have anti-churning rules, which just means you can't relocate jobs within a state, or if a business merges or acquires another business, the job can't come from a associated entity. It has to be permanent and full-time. We look at full-time as 35 hours a week for at least the portion of the year that they're employed, if not the full year. And they have to be earning at least 175% of the federal minimum wage to hit the $500 grant level, or 200% of the federal minimum wage to hit an $800 grant level. And the grants are by position, not altogether. And then the last thing is the health benefits. The company has to cover at least 50% of the premium, or they have to at least offer to. So if somebody opts out, that's fine, but they have to cover at least 50% of the health insurance premium. And so the big thing to remember for job creation grants is that there are excluded job types. So positions that are personal services, which are hair and nail salons, pet grooming, death services, so anything in the funeral home industry, those are all excluded. And it all goes by the NAICS codes. So it's very easy to look up on census.gov the type of position. You can just search it in the browser and it'll tell you. But it's personal services, food and beverage, and retail are excluded from the job creation grant. Not necessarily the company, but those actual positions. And if you have any questions on that, feel free to ask. I said permanent and full-time. We look at permanent as being an indefinite duration, so contract employees are typically excluded. And they have to report to work within the zone. So if you have a business like traveling nurses that go out, but they come into the zone and report to the zone at least once a month, those positions are qualified. But if positions are located at another branch and don't ever work in the zone, then they are not qualified.
But if, say, a company does contracting for the shipyard or for the other maritime industry, if their office is in the zone and those employees have a requirement to report to the office at some point.
Yes, it has to be. Yes, it has to be on a regular basis. They have to report there at least once a month. But yeah, if they work in a different location, but they do report, and it has to be not typically that they come to the zone for a meeting once a month. It would typically be that they actually do some type of work function within the zone.
So if they had required training, that was once a week training.
I'm not sure on that. That's something we would have to check on. And as we said, they have to be normally scheduled for the 35 hours a week. And that comes, we typically look at that as $1,680 a year if they offer standard fringe benefits. So the job creation grant, to calculate an award, it is based on the actual wage rate of the employee and the full months that they work in the year. And so we have a spreadsheet that the company that you'll see, I think in the next slide, and it calculates most of it out for you, so it's really not hard to do, but it does give you kind of fractions of employees that you'll see. So a business is eligible for up to $500 for positions that are earning between 175 and 199% of the federal minimum wage, and then they're up to $800 for positions that are 200% of the federal minimum wage or over. So what that means now is we're at $12.69, which I don't know if we're at $12.69 is 175. So jobs over $12.69 qualify for the $500, and jobs over $14.50 qualify for the $800 grants. You can kind of ignore this portion because you guys are not a high unemployment area for the sake of the enterprise zone. And the cap on grants is 350 grants a year. No. So basically, we'll get into it now. They're actually calculated every year as your annual employment for that grant year over the base year. So if in year one, we'll use this example, they had a base year in 2013 of 10 employees, they added 10 full-time employees, and just pay attention, we're using full numbers, which is not typically the case. You don't typically hire people on January 1 for the full year, but it makes the examples a lot simpler. So they added 10 employees in the grant year. So you'll see here, all positions we're assuming are at the $500 grant level at 175%, and they all worked the full year and they all meet the health requirements. So you'd have 20 grant year employees minus those 10 from 2013 that were already hired, minus those 4 jobs that are the threshold. So you have 6 grant eligible positions times the $500, so that's a $3,000 grant in year 1 for somebody who applies in 2014 for this example. So if they apply again in 2015 and they still have these 20 employees, this calculation will look exactly the same because they still have 20 grant year employees minus their 10 base year employees. So it's always grant year over base year. It's not year over year growth. So you can get up to 5 years. If you want to do a second set of 5 years, you can do so, but your base year does then become the last year of your previous round. You don't get to keep the original base year. Does anyone have any other questions on that? Okay. So that's kind of the quick and dirty of the job creation grant. As I mentioned, there are a lot of different regulations that go into the program, and we don't want to kind of completely blow through the timeline here. So that was the quickest way that we can do it. Okay, so we're going to go on to the real property investment grant. It sounds like we have a lot of real estate people in the room, so I think this will kind of go more towards the crowd. So the real property investment grants are available to investors undertaking rehab, expansion, or new construction projects within the enterprise zone. So it has to be a commercial facility by the broadest terms. It has to be commercial, industrial, or mixed use. Purely residential is excluded, and any mixed use facilities that are not at least 30% commercial are excluded. And then the other important thing, this is probably the most common question we get in the real property investment grant, is facilities, particularly in this area where we have some of the larger industrial areas. So if it's a group of buildings that are co-located, co-managed, co-owned, or and used for the same purpose, we consider that to be a facility, and they're actually capped together for the grant. And we'll get into kind of the caps and the thresholds for participation, but they actually share those if we consider you to be a facility. And it doesn't necessarily go by parcel line or by building, so that's one thing to keep in mind. So a qualified zone investor is any entity or individual that's actually capitalizing those investments. So whichever entity puts the investment on their books and capitalizes it for tax purposes. So this can be the property owner, whether they occupy it or not. It can be if there's multiple owners that own the building, that happens frequently. Or it can be the tenant. Tenants, it's a little trickier because typically they have to have either a ground lease or some type of capital improvements agreement, so that anytime you're a tenant, the owner has to give you permission, just because the owner of the property always has the rights to the grant program. So there is an investment threshold. If you are rehabbing or expanding an existing building, the grants are based on the amount invested over $100,000. And if you are building a new building, it's based on the amount invested over $500,000. So this does not, the first $500,000 in a new construction project does not contribute towards the grant amount. And those thresholds have to be met every year that you apply for a grant. The qualified costs are the hard construction costs. So some of the engineering costs or the architecture costs, any leasing costs, none of that contributes towards the grant amount. And it's typically our key of looking at things is whether or not it was taxed as real property. That's kind of the easiest way to figure out if something is going to qualify or not. So the examples of things, really the basics: carpentry, ceilings, demo, drywall, roofing. One thing that has come up this year with a few different items is the IRS decided to release new tangible property regulations as of February, which was already into our grant year, that changes the way small businesses can treat certain items and their tangible property. So they now have the ability to treat demolition as an expense and not capitalize it. To qualify for the grant, the item that you're trying to qualify must actually be capitalized on your books for tax purposes. So even if it meets the generally accepted principles for accounting as a capitalizable expense, if you choose to expense that item and not capitalize it, it does not qualify. And the biggest thing we've run into is demolition this year. That is now something that you can expense as a small business. So ineligible things, architecture, as I mentioned. The other big one is acquisition costs do not contribute towards that threshold. So the grant amount, as I mentioned, just to kind of, the other big one in here is furnishings. So any type of window treatments or appliances. Basically, if you picked up the building and shook it, anything that would fall out is not considered structurally part of the building and is not qualified. So the grant amount is 20% of the qualified real property investment over the threshold for whichever project they're doing, whether it's rehab or it's going to be new construction. So it is their grants are capped, typically at $100,000 if your overall investment is under $5 million. If your investment is over $5 million within 5 years, it's capped at $200,000. So everything is done year to year. Except for your cap, which is the $100,000 and $200,000, that goes over a 5-year period after year 1. So if you apply for the first time in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, you can't go over that $100,000 grant amount within that time period. So here are calculation examples. If you invest $500,000 in a rehab project, you subtract the $100,000 threshold to get $400,000 times the 20% rate, so you'd get a grant of about 80%, or $80,000, sorry. And likewise, if you did a new construction at $900,000 minus the $500,000 threshold, you'd come out to an $80,000 grant. So the cap works that if you had a $2 million investment, you'd subtract, for a rehab project, you'd subtract the $100,000 to get $1.9 million. At 20%, the 20% would be 380, but you'd still be, because you're under 5 million, you would still be capped at the $100,000. Okay. So there are some supplemental forms for the real property investment. As I mentioned earlier, if you're a tenant, you have to get permission from your owner. If you have multiple owners, you have to have an agreement that says who's responsible for what portion of the space within the building. And if you are a mixed-use building, you have to have a third party certify that your property is at least 30% commercial. So any questions about the real property investment? That was probably the quickest. Yes.
If you give incentive to a tenant to do some of those improvements in terms of free rent or cash outlay, does that qualify?
No. No, it's really the hard construction costs only.
Even though they'd be directly attributable to the hard costs?
When you say you give them an incentive, can you give more kind of?
Say they're going to do 50,000 in build out, and I offset it with 50,000 in free rent.
If they are capitalizing that investment, they would be the qualified applicant, not you, in that scenario. So that's how because it's whichever entity. It doesn't matter if somebody is kind of paying them on the back end. And likewise, if you did an improvement and the tenant ends up getting a bump in their rent, they can't apply for that bump, even though it is going towards those costs, because it's the entity that's capitalizing.
For the minimum threshold, am I understanding correctly that you just used the number 50,000? Is that sufficient to qualify?
No,
Versus the
that
100,000?
it would have to be 50,000 over 100.
100,000.
Yeah.
So if you're not putting up front $100,000 worth of improvements,
Yeah, so the state incentives are geared for the real property investment, often kind of bigger projects. So it's typically the local level incentives that will hit those smaller projects.
Is there any holding period requirement or any recapture?
No, there used to be when it was a tax program, but now it's a straight grant program, so there is no holding requirement.
On the one with that crossover of years.
Oh.
Replacement. Yeah, she talked to you about that.
So if you have a multi-phase project and you have, half of the project gets its final permits or its CO in 2013 and then the second half gets it in 2014, you would have to apply for those portions of the project separately because the grants go by the CO, not by the construction project. And I know that's kind of counterintuitive to how construction works in the real world, but we go by those certificates and those final inspection dates. So if you had a project, one CO received in January and one CO received in December of the same calendar year, those can be applied as one. So it's really that December 31st is the cutoff of whether you can consider it one project or two.
So if I've got a multi-tenant property and I'm doing 9 different build-outs during 2014,
You would have a cap of $100,000 if you're under 5 million. They would share a cap and they would share a threshold because it's considered to be one building.
even though it's all separate permits.
Typically, the only time a single building would be considered two different buildings is if the firewall follows the property line. So if you have, we just went through an example where there was a movie theater and a restaurant in the same building. They had two different addresses, but they had the same owner. They were owned and operated as one building, and the owner was trying to make the argument that there's a firewall, so they're two different buildings, but the firewall didn't run with the parcel line. So for our sake, they're considered one.
If something doesn't require a construction permit, do you go by completion outright or build?
So if it doesn't require permits, and we do check with the localities to ensure that it doesn't receive permits, you have to get a third-party inspection report, and that has to be, so whatever calendar year that is in, we go by. So we have a situation right now where they had a permit. They finished their project in 2014, but then didn't get it inspected until March, so now they have to wait until next year to apply because it's dated 2015.
Is there a qualified list of third-party inspectors?
We typically go by whatever the locality would accept and or recommend. So I would reach out to your building department and just say, we're doing this and we need a third party. Typically it's Class A or Class B for the qualified third party inspectors.
Thank you.
No problem. Anyone else?
Paving count?
Yes. So long as that's not all you do.
If you did some construction 2 years ago, we qualify.
No.
And when is this?
This is due actually on April 1st for anything that was done in 2014. Anything you complete in 2015 will be due on April 1st of 2016. Okay. If you guys have any question, my cards are up here. I don't have many of them because I'm actually out of them. Got to me too late in the year, but I'll pass them around and you guys can.
All right, any other questions for Jordan? Because I'm sure everybody would benefit from your question, not just you, so please speak up. Yes, thank you.
I know proration, in terms of taking out that money, what has been your recent history in proration?
Thank you for bringing that up. I don't know how I got that out of the presentation. So for grant year 2013, we prorated at just under 91 cents on the dollar. So the way the program works is if we have more requests than we have funding, we prorate all awards for the real property investment grant. This doesn't touch job creation grant. They don't typically ever get prorated. So we expect, because we've been seeing the demand going up and our allocation going down, we expect the proration to be a little deeper this year, but we have no idea what that will be until we get all the applications in. The lowest we've ever seen it was 46 cents on the dollar, so if you requested $100,000, you got $46,000. I don't think we foresee it to go that low. That was back in 2007, 2008.
And I'll just add a couple of things to that. The program was revamped in the mid-2000s after several years of proration. And
it was before.
in 2006 that it was...
2005.
It went into effect in 2005, 2006. And so with that, they established these minimum thresholds. Prior to that, there were not minimum thresholds. And so if you did a $50,000 job, you could qualify for 20% of the $50,000. And so 2 scenarios took place during that mid-2000s. They ramped up those thresholds to enhance the eligibility for the project. And then the economy declined a little, and the General Assembly has gone back and forth with funding the program. Now that the economy's picked back up, that leads to some of this proration. And again, the General Assembly a couple years ago, coming out of the recession, said we will not prorate the job grants. We will fund the job grants at 100% and then take the balance of the allocated monies and, if need be, prorate the real property investment grant.
Yeah, the job creation grants are typically only 20 to 25% of our total allocation. So they come out first, and then, as Mallory said, the rest goes to real property investment grants. Last year, if you requested $100,000, you got just about $91,000. So we assume it'll be, as I said, a little lower than that this year, but we really have no way of estimating what it'll be.
Until all the applications come in on April 1st and they go through and verify who qualifies and what the amounts they qualify, and then, there's
Yeah.
only
So the
pot's only so big.
the proration amount is typically announced in June.
And then the checks are typically cut by the Treasury Department at the state, or state treasurer.
In
on or
July.
about July 1st. I've gotten a little bit better, faster.
It's probably going to be a little after that this year just because of the amount. We typically get, just to give you an idea, 300 to 400 applications every year. So as those numbers go up, the timeline, unfortunately, gets a little longer.
But it's the program is well worth it. That is state money that the General Assembly has designated for this program, and we're here in Portsmouth doing everything we can to make sure you take advantage of it. We want you to take advantage of that program and maximize those dollars, and we're going to do everything we can to help you along those ways. Anybody who's got an application that's going to the state or will be going to the state, there is one section of that application that you need me to participate in, and that is on the first page in the first big block. They're like the last 3 blocks. I have to sign validating that your property or business is located in the enterprise zone, and I authenticate which of the 2 zones in Portsmouth you're in. I do nothing else with those applications. I don't proof them. I don't validate anything else on them. All I do is give my seal of approval that your business or property is in one of our 2 zones, and if so, which one. Those obviously are due April 1st. I am available, and the office knows how to track me down so that when you're ready and you have an application for my signature, call in, either bring it by. A lot of times what we're doing now, and I got 3 last night, I get them by email, I print the PDF, I fill in my blocks, I scan it, I send it back, and it's all done. I did that last night for 3 at 7 p.m. and CPAs were done and ready and waiting. So I'm on alert. I will be traveling the 27th, 8th, and 9th of the month, but I will be back in here on the 31st and 1st to sign all those. And again, while I'm traveling, I should have the ability to send back some signatures. So that's on the state side.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to shift gears for a second. I'm going to run through. All right, so I'm going to run through a series of the local incentives tied to this zone, and then I'll turn it over to Brian Donahue, who will talk about one of the local incentives with this program, one of these 2 zones that he administers. And then we'll move on to the foreign trade zone and the Port Authority incentives, the local incentive program run through the EDA, and then the hub zone program. So again, we've got some local incentives here. We're trying to be consistent with revitalization and development goals. They are measurable, and they represent this council and staff's sound fiscal policy. We have a series, as I mentioned, there are a series of local incentives. I do have our incentives brochure here, and I want to make sure that everybody gets one on the way out. They cover not just the enterprise zone, but these other zones we're talking about today, and they are a duplication of everything on the website. So if you go paperless, just stick with the website. If you like to have a hard copy, here it is. So we have a development fee rebate that I'll talk about that is the same in both zones. We have a business personal property investment grant that's offered in each zone with a nuance to each one. We have a machinery and tool investment grant that's offered in each zone that's a little different in each, a little different criteria in each. We have the commercial facade loan that the Housing Authority administers, which is only available in a portion of Zone 1, and Brian will talk about that. We have the real estate investment grant that is new and in Zone 2. We have the corridor streetscape improvement incentive and the mixed-use development incentive, which are both only offered in Zone 1. I won't spend a lot of time on those. They're for significant and large-scale projects. And then we have 2 citywide incentives that you may or may not be aware of that are available anywhere in the city. One is the tax exemption for rehab structures, and the other is environmental restoration site exemption, which are available citywide. But if you're in one of our zones, the criteria may be a little bit different, the threshold may be a little bit lower, and the benefit may be a little bit greater. And again, all of the particulars are on the slides, they're on the website, and they're in the brochure. And I just want to give you a taste and a flavor, kind of like Jordan did with the state incentives here. The development fee rebate is a scenario where certain fees and permits that you apply for when you're making improvements to real estate will be rebated to you after the fact. After you pay for them up front, you get all your inspections, and then a portion of them are rebated back. And they're not all your fees and all your permits, just certain ones. And it's after certificate of occupancy, not different from the state. It's a sort of pay for performance, except in this case, it's a rebate after the fact. You must be doing either new construction or improvements to an existing structure that total at least $50,000 and result in an increase in the real estate assessment. So normal customary repairs are not what we're talking about. We're talking about something that increases the value of that property. There are 2 parts to that application, and my colleague Toy is going to be working with me to make those parts to the application available online in a fillable PDF. Right now, you simply call our office and I'll provide them. Part 1 is to put me on alert that you're getting ready to do some work, and then part 2 is after the fact, when you've got your CO, you've completed it, and you're ready now to give me documentation on the permits and fees that you paid so that I can confirm with my colleagues at City Hall and then issue a rebate. I work closely, as that last bullet said, with the planning department, the engineering department, and the building official, who are the different agencies that are collecting those fees and permit amounts on the front end. We have a business personal property investment grant that is available in both zones. Right now, there are some nuances in the 2 whereby while it's the same incentive, the qualifying requirements for Zone 1 are different than Zone 2. We are looking at modifying that, and we're making application to the state to bring them into conformity, but we're not there yet. The business personal property grant is a grant equal to 50% of the net increase in your business personal property tax over the course of 5 years. Essentially, it's a rebate, but I'm not allowed to rebate taxes, so we call it a grant. You make the investment, you share the information with us, you pay your taxes, and then lo and behold, you make application to me, and guess what? You get a grant equal to 50% of what that new tax was that you just paid. That's essentially how it works. It is again done after you have done your investment. It is again after you have paid your taxes. It is again after you have met the qualifications, which are you must make an investment of at least $100,000 in new tangible taxable business personal property. You must create new jobs, and for us under this program, that means new jobs to Portsmouth or to the zone. So if you are hopscotching from somewhere else, we're talking about new jobs to Portsmouth. So if you move from Norfolk or you move from Hampton, the state may not let you use that for their job grant program, but I'll let you use it for here, because so long as it's a new job to Portsmouth, I can count that. So under that, creating new jobs, right now in Zone 1, that must be 10 jobs, and in Zone 2, it must be 5 jobs. And in Zone 1, those 10 new jobs and the business must be in these targeted industries. As I mentioned, we are making application to the state to bring all this in conformance, so those targeted industries will not be a requirement in Zone 1, and the number of jobs will also be 5 instead of 10, but we don't have that approved yet by the state. Obviously, we're not going to provide a grant if you're behind on your business license or don't have a business license, or you're behind on other taxes or fees or things that are required to the city. So you make the investment, you create the new business personal property tax, you hire the new individuals, we make sure that all your bills are current with the city, and then we administer a rebate equal to 50% of that new tax, business tangible personal property tax. Similarly, in both zones, we have a program if you're a manufacturer and you don't pay business personal property tax and you instead pay machinery and tool tax. And through this program, again, we have some variations between Zone 1 and Zone 2 on investment amounts, which we are working to modify and change. Right now, though, this is how it stands. In Zone 1, you must invest at least $1 million in new machinery and tools. And in Zone 2, you must invest at least $500,000. In Zone 1, you must create at least 15 jobs, and they must have a certain wage threshold. And in Zone 2, you must create at least 5 jobs. We are working to make application to bring those investment numbers to be the same in both of 500,000, and we're also working to bring those jobs into conformance between the two zones of 5 jobs and not get into your business of the wage requirement. Both of these programs require that you sign an agreement with the EDA who administers the program, saying that if you leave town, if you take advantage of either one of these and then you up and leave town after you've gotten a rebate or you've gotten a grant back and saved some tax money, if you go to leave town within a certain period of time, you have to pay us back. We're doing this because we're expecting you to be here for the long haul, stay with us, and participate in the business community. The commercial facade loan program is run by the Redevelopment and Housing Authority. It is just in a portion of Zone 1, and with that, I'm going to flip this over to Brian Donahue for a few minutes to talk about that.
Good morning once again. My name is Brian Donahue. I'm with the Portsmouth Redevelopment and Housing Authority. As Mallory said, we have a commercial facade improvement loan program at PRHA that we offer to Portsmouth property owners. The program has been around for approximately 30 years. It's responsible for a lot of the improvements and rehabilitations that you see on High Street as you come and go through town. So a lot of those improvements are directly related to this program, and you'll see a few photos as we go through the presentation of some of those properties. The purpose of the program is to provide a low-interest rehab loan for improvements to existing structures within 3 key areas that are located within Zone 1 of the Enterprise Zone. That's the downtown, midtown, and recently added Port Norfolk District. And these funds are available for making physical improvements to the exterior facade of the property. What type of improvements that would include would be things such as painting, signage, lighting improvements and upgrades, installation of awnings, also window, door replacement, and roof replacement would also be included. If you have any specific questions about whether an item that you are proposing would be eligible, you could certainly call and inquire, and we would be happy to walk you through that. Who's eligible for this? It would be any owner of existing property within the district. That would include both commercial or mixed-use properties. Could I get a show of hands of folks who are in the room who are existing owners of property? It's about 10, which is great. How about folks who are business owners who are leasing property? Great, so that's 4 or 5. Which means you can go to your landlord and ask that they inquire about the program and making improvements. The structure must be in the zone. We do not allow for new construction activities. This is strictly upgrades to existing properties. And any property that is strictly residential would not be eligible under the program. These are the boundaries of the district. The only area that you see here on the slide that is not eligible would be the Port Center Commerce Park District there in Southside here. If you have a question about a property that you are looking to pursue some improvements on, you can contact our office. Our staff will geolocate that on the map, and we can tell you whether or not that is eligible. You can also go to the Economic Development Department's website. They do have an excellent mapping tool there, which you can utilize as well. Here are some of the terms and some general information about the program. So we offer a interest rate of prime minus 2%. Prime's just about 3.25 right now, so we have a floor set of 3%, which is what the rate is as of today. But that does fluctuate. Let's hope interest rates don't creep up, but I hear that they may be later this summer. We do a 10-year term, and we do require a 1% origination fee. You can roll that into the loan amount. We also allow for you to roll in any closing costs, legal fees that may be associated with the loan into the loan amount. A minimum loan amount of $5,000. We do allow for up to $50,000 per property. Some of the requirements that we have put in place, you are required to have all of your city approvals in place. So that means any planning, building permits need to be received. We do ask that all taxes and fees with the City of Portsmouth be current and up to date. We do check on that. And then very similar to the state program, we do not allow for funds to be earmarked for any furnishings or trade fixtures, anything of that sort. So the process for pursuing this program, we require that you obviously pick up an application. I have some with me today. If anybody's interested, I can leave one with you. We do also have those available on our website. We encourage you to come to us before submitting an application and have a pre-app meeting to sit down with staff, tell us a little bit about what you're planning to do. We walk through the process. We have staff members who are able to look at the types of improvements that you're planning to make. We can let you know if they're eligible or ineligible and guide you through the process. After submitting that, we review that internally. If everything looks in order, we bring that to our Board of Commissioners for a formal approval. The process is very similar to if you were pursuing a commercial bank loan for improvements to a property. And then after the board has approved that, we'll make arrangements for closing. I just want to note that we will not disperse funds for improvements that are completed prior to closing. So the project cannot have commenced until the loan has actually closed. The whole process from submittal of an application to approval and a closing on average would take about 60 days. And certainly the more information you're able to provide ahead of time, the better our ability is to fast track that at an even further reduced schedule. We require that construction starts within 30 days of the loan closing, and then upon completion of the project, we do require that the project closes out 60 days following substantial completion and the final disbursement of the loan draw. During the process of construction, we will come out, we'll make frequent inspections, and we do that in advance of a draw request. So it's very similar to a construction loan that you would obtain, again, through a commercial lender. The process is very similar. We come out, make an inspection. If the work is done, we will stroke a check to the property owner, the borrower, for the amount of work completed to date at that time. Here's my contact information. My email address is here. I also have our website address. If you go to prha.org, under the Doing Business with Us header, we do have some information online about the program. I'm certainly able to answer any questions that you may have as well this morning about the program. Great. I do have some flyers up front if you'd like to take one before you leave. Again, feel free to reach out, and I'll note Toy, she's over here. They have here at the city, they have a facade improvement grant. It's a little bit different. It's a grant program. I will note that you do have the ability to couple the two programs together. So if you are looking to make improvements that would exceed the $25,000, I believe it's $25,000 limit of the grant, you can couple this with the facade loan program. And likewise, if you're exceeding the $50,000 limit of the grant program, you can always up it with the grant funds that are available as well. Thank you.
I mentioned earlier that we have a real estate investment grant that is only offered in Zone 2, the newer zone, the more industrial waterfront zone. And I'd like to have a candidate take advantage of this. I have not had someone do this yet, so please be the guinea pig for me, and let's walk through this maybe this year. This is a real estate investment grant, but if you'll see as we read through it, it's kind of like those other two. It's kind of like a rebate, but I can't rebate taxes, so you make the investment, you pay your taxes, we make sure you're current on everything, you meet the qualifications, and lo and behold, you get a grant equal to half of what you paid in your real estate tax. Imagine how that's funded. So again, it's only in Zone 2, which is that industrial waterfront area along Elm Avenue, Burton's Point Road, the PMT Pinners Point area, and West Norfolk. So it's a cash grant from the EDA equal to 50% of the net increase in your real estate taxes that are paid on improvements over 5 years. It's only paid after you have made your investment in the real estate and your taxes are current. You must invest at least $500,000 in new construction, and you must have the ability to sign an agreement with us that you'll have the various agencies at the City Hall release information to us. And we do work closely with the city assessor on this project. And if the investment increases and you invest more than $500,000, if you invest as much as $1.5 million, your grant increases. If you invest as much as $3 million, it increases even more. I mentioned earlier that we have two incentives that are available in Enterprise Zone 1 that are the Corridor Streetscape Improvement Incentive, and the other one, I'll just briefly touch on these because these are for $25 million and above $25 million and above projects, and they are subject to city funding. In essence, if you're doing something of this magnitude and there are plans to do public improvements at some point in time that the city's planning on doing, if we have the ability to come in and do those sooner rather than later, and at the same time that you're doing your project, then this is how that sort of comes into play. I'll be quite candid, we haven't had a scenario where anyone's taken advantage of this one yet. Similarly, we have a mixed-use development project that's, again, for projects of $25 million or more, whereby if the only way to make this deal happens, it requires some inducement of some sort, we'll sit down and negotiate and do that. This is for mixed-use development, so that does mean the project needs to be multifamily and commercial combined. I mentioned there were two programs that are citywide, but that if you're in one of the enterprise zones, the thresholds may not be as stringent or the benefits may be greater. Keep in mind, if your property is anywhere in Portsmouth, you may be eligible for this. And I'll go through the citywide requirements, and then I'll touch on how it differs if you're in one of the two enterprise zones. And Billy Butt with our city assessor's office helps run this program. He sadly was available on February 19th, but when today came along, something came up and he was not able to join us, so he sends his regrets. Again, it's a citywide program. It provides a 10-year real estate tax exemption for increases in real estate assessment from renovations to commercial or industrial structures that are at least 25 years old. And whereby the work that you do, when the new assessment is done, it's increased the value as a result of those renovations by at least 60%, and that increase in assessment was not because you tripled the size of the building. You can obviously do an addition, but that increase in assessed value can't account for more than 15% of the increase in the value of the assessment. Lots of people take advantage of this program citywide. It is available to residents, not just commercial and industrial properties. If you are in either one of the enterprise zones, here's how it differs just a little bit. First of all, the application fee of $50 is waived. Second of all, it applies to mixed-use properties as well. That age requirement is now, instead of being 25 years, it only has to be 15 years old. And depending on what happens to the assessment as a result of your improvements. If you do at least 100%, so obviously you've had to increase the assessed value by at least 60% to take advantage of the program at all. If you increase it by at least 100% or more, then the program extends further out and you get to take advantage of the program for 15 years, not just 10 years. So, and the idea behind the program citywide and in the enterprise zone is if you're making investments in the real estate to increase the assessed value of that, we're not going to penalize you coming out of the gate for having made that investment. It's an opportunity for you to have a little bit of a tax savings to recoup that investment that you've made. There is also a program that we've had one individual take advantage of that is through the environmental restoration site exemption. It is available citywide. It just has a couple of different nuances if you're in enterprise zone number 2. It's essentially for like brownfield redevelopment. So if you've got something that's been a little quirky before, this is a way to entice folks to do redevelopment on those sites. It's provides for a 5-year tax exemption on land and improvements on environmental restoration sites on the full assessed value of the land and improvements up to $3 million, and then anything over the $3 million is assessed and taxed at the full rate. For properties in enterprise zone number 2, that benefit exceeds up to a value of $5 million. It is incumbent upon the property owner to provide the necessary paperwork from the Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ at the state, to state that you meet the qualifications for this program. But we would obviously sit down and talk with Billy and the other folks in the assessor's office to walk anybody who wants to look into the program as they start to do something for that. So with that, you now have the information on the Virginia Enterprise Zone program. As a reminder, we have 2 zones in Portsmouth. We have the zone that is predominantly commercial that runs from downtown to midtown, picks up the entire Victory and Elmhurst and Greenwood Industrial Park area and captures the Mass Center. That program's been in place since 2010 and brings with it all the state incentives and a handful of the local incentives. We then have the second enterprise zone that Portsmouth received in 2014, which is largely industrial waterfront. It takes in all of West Norfolk. It takes in the PMT Pinners Point area, and it takes in along Frederick Boulevard, down Elm Avenue, down Burton's Point Road to pick up all the industry along the southern branch of the Elizabeth River. And with that, you get those 2 state incentives and then a handful of these local incentives. And they are administered through our office. The local incentives are through the Housing Authority for that facade loan program, and in conjunction with the various departments at City Hall that we interact with, the City Assessor's Office. We work closely with the Planning Department, the Building Official, and the Engineering Department. So with that, any last questions on our 2 state-designated enterprise zone programs before we take about a 2-minute recess? Somebody's got to have a burning question that they didn't ask Jordan or that they got for me. No? All right. Well, with that, we'll just take literally about a 2-minute recess. Okay. We have Laura Godbold with the Port Authority with us, and she's going to talk about and run through 2 programs for us today.
Thank you, Mallory. Again, I'm Laura Godbold. I'm with the Port of Virginia. If you don't know, we own and operate all the container terminals in the harbor here. We also operate the Port of Richmond, and then we have an inland port that's a rail ramp, essentially. Can I see a show of hands of how many people in the room are importing or exporting through any of our ports? Okay. Well, we will run through these really quick then because they do not apply to any of you currently, but hopefully in the future we'll see you importing and exporting through the Port of Virginia. So we have 3 tax credits, a grant program, and then I'm going to discuss the Foreign Trade Zone program. So how do you qualify for the tax credits? You just have to have a Virginia income tax liability and then import or export through a public or private terminal. So you can import or export through our terminals or any of the terminals down the Elizabeth River. The first one is port volume increase. So if you're increasing your cargo by 5%
over the previous year, you can qualify for $50 per TEU. A TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit, and that's the standard measurements for containers. So the smaller containers that you see on the roads are the 20 foots. There's also 40-foot containers and 45-foot containers. The pot is $3.2 million for this fund. There is a cap of $250,000, but if that's oversubscribed or undersubscribed, you could receive more or less. This one is for barge and rail. So if you are transporting your containers currently on the road, the highway systems, and you put them on the barge or rail, you can receive $25 per TEU for this credit. So for example, in 2012, if you didn't handle any containers and then you handled 150 on the rail or barge, the next year you could qualify for all 150 of those containers. The last tax credit is International Trade Facility, and this is a credit for creating new jobs or capital investment that increases the cargo by 5% through the port. So that is $3,500 per qualified full-time position, or 2% of your capital investment. There is a cap of $1.2 million per fiscal year, but there's no cap per taxpayer. We also have a grant program, which is the cash program as opposed to the tax credit. So this is the Port of Virginia Economic and Infrastructure Development Grant Program. It's a mouthful, but we call it the POV grant. And it is for people that locate or expand a facility in Virginia, create 25 full-time positions, are involved in maritime commerce, and it has to be through the Port of Virginia in this case. It can't be a private terminal. And then engaged in one of the following: distribution, freight forwarding, etc. So this one is calculated per job. So 25 to 49 jobs gets $1,000 per job. 50 to 74 get $1,500 per job, and then 75 through 99 get $2,000, and 100 plus get $3,000 per job. So those were all Port of Virginia incentives and tax credits, but the Foreign Trade Zone program is a federal program that we applied for back in the 70s. So does anybody know what a Foreign Trade Zone is? You do, good. So I administer this program, and a Foreign Trade Zone is basically an area that's inside the United States but it's considered outside for customs purposes, and that's basically for the duty deferral or reductions. So it's typically around a port facility. It can be a rail port, a seaport, or airport. The Port of Virginia is the grantee of this program, so it's my job to market the program and then monitor the use once a company locates within it. And all you commercial brokers, Mr. Zarpas, you can market this program. The service area is all of Hampton Road, so all of Portsmouth is under a foreign trade zone. So any building that you would like to locate in to receive the benefits of the foreign trade zone, you can do so. So once you're importing products into your zone, you can do all of these things from storage to manufacturing within a foreign trade zone. These are the major benefits. The first one being duty deferral, which means you just are importing your products into your zone and then storing them. It's really just a cash flow savings for you. The second one is for manufacturers, inverted or duty reduction. When you're importing products, they have different duty rates on each product, but the finished product typically has a lower duty rate than each individual component. So when you manufacture, you can receive the lower inverted tariff for those products. Weekly entry is specific to the foreign trade zone. Typically, every time you import a product, you have to make entry to customs. So in the foreign trade zone, you can make entry one time a week as opposed to possibly every day, and cap that at $485. And there's also no time constraint in the foreign trade zone. you can store anything indefinitely. I don't know why you would do that, but it's an option. Activation is an easy process. The first step is a 2-page application with me and the Foreign Trade Zone Board in Washington. And it takes 30 days to activate a site for designation. And then after that's approved, we go to Customs and we work with them to activate. And they're really just looking for a procedures manual on how you operate your zone. So that can take about 3 months. These are some questions that if you fit these criteria, then maybe the foreign trade zone would be right for you. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
One of the good things about the Foreign Trade Zone program that Laura touched on is the fact that it is all of Portsmouth now. Years ago, the way the program was run, and some of our real estate agents in the audience may recall this, it was just the 60 acres of Port Center Commerce Park, and if you wanted to manufacture or distribute from somewhere else in the city, you were not eligible. And so now with the way the Port Authority has worked with the feds, it's now all of Portsmouth, so that's an advantage. So share that with folks you know who manufacture or who import and export.
Thank you.
So good morning, I'm Toy Wilson, and I'll be going over the local incentives program. And just to give you a little background on this program, there's 4 different grants that are a part of the local incentives program. And it's different than what Mallory went over earlier because this program is totally local here in Portsmouth, and it's funded by our Economic Development Authority. So they give us a pool of money to work within to operate these 4 grants. And within that pool of money, we're able to do a facade improvement grant, an interior build-out grant, something called Windows of Opportunity, which I will explain, and a safety and security grant. One thing I do want to touch on before we go further is that these are all reimbursement grants. Some are at 50%, some are at 100%, but it does mean that the applicant does have to pay for the project up front to be reimbursed. And I'd like to also mention that it's not a financing tool, it's a funding tool. So for example, if there are projects that have to be paid for upfront or either phased, like with a contractor, this is paid at the end. The reimbursement is paid at the end and not during the project, like a construction project where construction or contractors typically want to be paid in draws. So these are the 4 that we're going to go over. And just to give you some more background, these are all on our website. It's portsmouthvaed.com under the incentives. And these are the local incentives, and there are PDF applications there. You can pick them up at the office too. I have hard copies, but they're all online as well, which give the guidelines. So there's a geography to all 4 of these grants. And the first one is the downtown area, which you can see here, which stops at Effingham Street, which covers the traditional downtown, Old Town Portsmouth area, not the residential. The next section is up through, from the Effingham Street, it picks up and it goes up to Midtown in this area here. Here's where Frederick Boulevard is, so it goes up to about the BB&T, up on High Street. And it also covers an area there in Port Norfolk, so it goes up London and up High. It also covers this area in Port Norfolk. I believe this is the 2700 and the 2600 block of Detroit and the 300 block of Broad, and obviously on the other side is the same numbers. And this is the Craddock area in that Afton Parkway, the U shape in the little retail area there. So those are the 4 geographies that have been approved by our EDA. It started out with just being the downtown, and we were able to expand to the 3 other geographies. And see, these are the only 4 geographies that are included under the local incentives program at this time. So first I'll go over the facade improvement grant, and it's just for the facade. So it's designed to address what you can see from the right-of-way, from the outside. So it would include things like windows, painting, doors, semi-permanent fixtures, but I'll go over that a little bit more. To be eligible, it has to be the property owner. It can also be the tenant, but you have to have the property owner's permission, of course, to make any changes to the outside. You have to be up to date with all of your fees that are owed to the city. And if you have outstanding code violations, you can do the facade improvement grant if you're going to use the facade improvement grant to rectify those the violations of code. If you do have code violations and you're not attempting to fix those violations with the facade improvement grant, you need to fix that first before we can enter into the grant process with you. It includes all property types with the exception of residential. So if it's a single-family residential home, it would not be included in this grant program. However, mixed use or multifamily and obviously commercial would be included. And this is not for a new construction project. It has to be on an existing structure. So this is a list of all the things that will be included, and they're in your, did everyone get the PowerPoint? I'll hand this around if you didn't pick up one. They're in there, so I won't read everyone to you, read each of them to you, but I'll give you an overview of some of them. One, it does include the contracted labor, so that's a little bit different than the one you heard about earlier with only the hard costs. So for example, if you have a project manager or if there's architectural costs, this would be included. You can include that in there. Also, if the contractor gives you an estimate, I kind of go ahead and give you a 15% contingency as far as what we're going to earmark for you, just in case there are runovers. However, you're only paid back 50% on the dollar up to $25,000, which I'll go over a little bit more. It also includes some roof work, but not only roof work, because you really can't see the roof, right? So that's really not the facade. But if you're going to do facade improvements, you can include the roof work with that, but just not roof work that stands alone. And as I said before, it's also for permanent improvements. So that does include some sort of landscaping, not the plants, of course, because those can die, but it would cover like cement pots or cement potters, which you often see maybe like in a downtown retail area. Do you have any questions about the cost before I move on? Reimbursable cost? Okay. So here's the application process. The application process is that you get an application from me or online, and you would turn that back into me, and I would actually present those to the Economic Development Authority at their next meeting. And I have a schedule of all of their meetings inside of the application. We present that to the EDA. With their approval, you would proceed forward. And this is a pre-application process, whereas you get the application and the approval for the funding, but you still need to have all of your other approvals. So this doesn't circumvent that process that you would have like with the Downtown Design Commission, for example, or the Historical Preservation Society, or any other permits that you have to have. This doesn't circumvent that process. So you'd still have to have all of those things, and you have 90 days to get all of those approvals. And then you come back to me with the approvals that you have and the permits to actually go forward with your project. We enter into a grant agreement, which is a document that basically says that you agree to accept the dollars that have been granted to you, and the EDA agrees to give you those dollars at the end of your project, and then you start your project, and then you have 6 months to complete that project. Are there any questions on the facade improvement grant before I move forward?
Are there thresholds on that?
The cap is $25,000, which is a 50% reimbursement. So for example, you can have a project that's at $50,000, and the grant that would come back would be $25,000. Now, if you had a project that was, say, $51,000, the cap is still $25,000, so you're on your own for the rest. But there is no minimum. So for example, if you want to do it yourself and you want to do some painting or you want to replace the windows, if you have that capability, we don't reimburse you obviously for the sweat equity, but if you have the receipts from, say, Lowe's or Home Depot, you can be reimbursed for that as well. So if that's $100, $50 would be the reimbursement. So there is no minimum, but there is a maximum. They're designed to be for the small business owner. Okay?
Is this what Brian Donahue was saying with piggyback? So if they are doing the facade, if you do a facade loan through them, the reimbursement that comes from the grant can go to pay back off the loan that would have been.
That's correct.
out by this?
So I'd like to talk about that a little bit, about how you choose to finance the project. And this would go for the interior build-out grant that I'll explain as well. So say, for example, you have a $50,000 project that you're going to do, but you've got to finance that up front. You can do it in several ways, but you do have to let me know, and I have to be able to verify how you're going to do that. Because when we hold those funds, when you're approved for those funds, the idea is that you have the monies to be able to go forward with this project, because we're holding them up from somebody else that may have the funds. So I need to know that. So for example, if you get a loan from your bank or credit union, I can take a look at the approval letter or the loan proceeds check, or if you're going to use a credit card, if I can get a copy of the document that shows the line of credit that you have. You can go to PRHA and do their loan if you want to. That's an option for you. But you have to do your research and to figure out what's the best option for you, because, like I said, that my grant pays at the end as a reimbursement. And so if you're getting a loan, if you go through your bank or PRHA and you do a construction perm type of loan, you know it pays in draws. So if your contractor is being paid in draws for that, you need to be able to negotiate that with them and whoever your lender is, to let them know you're not going to have 50% of the principal of your loan until the end. So you kind of have to think about how you want to finance it. But I do need to understand how you're going to finance it, but you can do it however you want, cash, your own cash, however you choose to do it. And about that, and when you do come for the reimbursement, I need to see how you've paid your contractors. So if you paid them in cash, that would not be reimbursable. It has to be canceled checks and an invoice that's stamped paid from the contractors. We need to know you've actually paid them before we can reimburse you. Okay? Any questions about that? Okay? So this is the interior build-out grant, and it works about the same way, but it has a different purpose. The purpose of the interior build-out grant is to take a rough space and turn it into what we call a vanilla shell space, to clean it up and make it attractive to any tenant that a seller or a landlord may have. Or it could be for someone that has already signed a lease agreement, and it has to be for a 2-year lease agreement to make their tenant improvements. And then we can go into an interior build-out. Now, some existing businesses can do it, but it has to be an expansion of the space, expanding into an additional space, so that it's going to be an expansion of like a retail space or bringing more business. That's the idea behind it. So like I said, it can be property owners and tenants, just as with the facade improvement grant. Current with all your fees to the city, does not include residential, no new construction. Property owners to vanilla shell space or for the tenant improvements, existing businesses to expand. This is an example of the types of costs that can be reimbursable. HVAC systems, interior walls, interior plumbing, flooring, and also it would include the 15% contingency of that. So far we've completed one. Miss Gray's property at 632 High Street, and it's very beautiful on the inside, and it included a whole new bathroom. So that was a really great way for that project to come to life and have a new retail space, and it's very attractive on the inside now. Here's the application process. You would bring that application to me, and we would review that application together with all the information from your contractor. I present it on your behalf for the EDA. It works the same. You have to have the approvals from the appropriate city departments. You get those and put those together with the grant agreement. Bring that back. We enter into a grant agreement process together, and in 6 months, done with the project and cut the check for 50%. This is a little bit different because the threshold is less. The cap on this is $10,000. So you can do a $20,000 project and be reimbursed for 50%. So same deal. So if your project is a $21,000 project, the cap is still $10,000 and you're on your own for the remainder. There is no minimum though. So if there's things like if there's a space that's very rough on the inside and you're able to do some of that work yourself, like put up the walls, okay, then it would be for the reimbursement of that. But like I said, there are some that are professional types of jobs like HVAC and roofing and that type of thing that you would probably have to get a professional for, unless of course you do that. This is the safety and security grant, and this one is a little different in that it's 100% reimbursable, up to $2,000. This is for existing businesses, or it could be for attracting a new business into a space. And this is a program that we work with in partnership with the police department and the fire department. And the purpose of this grant is to make the business area safer and give the business owner a sense of safety with security equipment, new locks and doors, surveillance cameras. What happens is we go into an application together. We get the police to come and do a survey, which is a free service that they do. Or if you decide to do, say, a fire suppression system, we would have the fire marshal come out and they do a survey of the business. They will write up a report and they determine, we think that maybe you should have more lighting on the outside, or maybe the numbers on the door should be larger in case they need to come out and see you and they want to know what's going on there. They need to be able to identify it sooner. They come out and say things like you have a bush that's right in the front, and if there's something going on here. We can't see inside. They give their assessment. And what that does is two things. It gives the business owner an idea of what my issues may be, but it also allows you to have a better relationship with the police department, because that's something that we want to have too, to work interdepartmentally. So they do that assessment and they produce a report. I get a report and you have it as well. You do your application. You go out and find the vendor of your choice to install your systems, and I get the receipt and we reimburse you up to $2,000. It does not cover any monthly subscriptions. It only covers the equipment. And I'll say this for everything. The idea is that there's no FF&E included in any of the grants, nothing that you can pick up and leave with, no furniture, fixture, or equipment. It's only for things that are going to be hardwired and permanent improvement to the space, because the idea is to make the business district better and also to encourage businesses to prosper within the parameters of the grants. Are there any questions about that? Okay. The last one is the Windows of Opportunity Grant, which is quite different. This would probably be more appealing to a property owner or commercial real estate broker that is marketing an empty space. And what this does is, these are window wraps, or kind of like signage. And an example of this that you may have seen is at the corner of Effingham and High Street at the first floor of the Montgomery Square building. These are window wraps for the windows, and the idea behind this is that it kind of eliminates that empty window feeling by putting some art in the windows, but it also gives you an opportunity to market the space. This is also 100% reimbursable up to $2,000. There's an application process and an approval of the art, of course, that you're going to put in the window. You also have to have that approved by zoning, because it's signage, and so that has to be approved as well. And with those approvals, you go out and choose a vendor, and we have the receipt, and we reimburse those costs up to $2,000, 100% reimbursable. Are there any questions on that local incentives program?
For the one you were just describing, the Windows package, is that limited to if you are in a vacant space, or not necessarily if you're doing a window applique situation?
Well, the windows of opportunity would be for a vacant space. If you were going to upgrade the windows and you're in an existing business, I would recommend doing the facade improvement grant.
Okay.
And you can include that in a bigger project, or you can do it as one project. That facade improvement grant and all of the grants are a cap on that parcel, on the building on that parcel. So for example, if a business wanted to do the windows under the facade improvement grant program, for example, it would not be 100% reimbursable, it would be 50% reimbursable, but say that was a $1,000 project, so you'll get $500 back. You still have an opportunity to come back with a project that would, in theory, allow you to take advantage of $24,500 worth of grant funds, because there's a cap on the parcel. So it's not a one-time deal. Okay? Any other questions? And I'll just give you an idea of what we've done with the facade, or the FIG, we call it. 606 High Street is the Menino's restaurant. They have done a facade improvement grant. 632 High Street has done a facade improvement grant. Clark Law Office, across from Menino's, they've done that. They did their awnings. We have a project, or several projects going on right now in the 800 block of High Street on the other side of Effingham Street at 814, and also in the 900 block, Club de Porus and AE Systems across the street where you see the construction going on, facade improvement grant projects. Okay, are there any, yes sir?
What was the cap again on the interior of that grant?
The cap is $10,000, so the project could be $20,000. It could be more, of course, but the cap on the funds back is $10,000. Yes, sir.
Is that per unit or per property?
Per property, per parcel. Any other questions? My cards are up here as well. My name is Toy, and please call me or email me if you have any questions after this. Take a look at the applications which are on the web that have a great outline of the guidelines, and I'd be glad to walk you through it. Okay? Thank you.
I'm Monique McWhite. I work with Old Dominion University with the Business Gateway. I have a program called the Hampton Roads Procurement Assistance Center, and what I do is I help businesses, small and large, work with the government. If you want to work with the state or local municipalities
or you want to work with the federal government, I can help you with the registrations, the set-asides, review proposals, anything to do with government procurement. You come to me and I can help you. And today we're going to be talking about the Hub Zone, historically underutilized business zone. It's a contracting program, and it is through the government. They have goals: 23% for small business, 3% for the Hub Zone. And you may think, well, that's kind of small, but in 2012, $9.2 billion was allocated to small businesses under that, and 40% of the small businesses that got a Hub Zone contract, the median is $365,000. So that's pretty good. Okay, this program it's locality based. It's based on areas that not necessarily have had businesses in that location in the past, and they base it on if the area is 80% below the per capita income and or over 1% of the unemployment rate, that will be deemed to be a Hub Zone area. And threefold: they need to increase the employment opportunities, stimulate the capital investment, and empower communities through economic leveraging. Because if you're going to have a business in a Hub Zone, your employees are going to be going to get a cup of coffee across the street, bring your dry cleaning, using the areas around, so to build the economy. So it is a very good program. Stop me if anyone has any questions. I'll be happy to help you answer those questions. Okay, it's an SBA program, and the SBA regulates this program and has a list of all Hub Zone businesses participating, and it's called the Dynamic Small Business Search, which is through the SBA profile. How many of you are registered in SAM? Okay, if you want to do any work with the government, you need to be registered in Systems of Award Management, which prior to 2012 was CCR. So now every CCR, ORCA, Dun & Bradstreet, IRS, everything is housed into this one system. And through the system, this is how government contractors and also primes do their market research to see who is out there, what businesses are out there, because there's some contracting goals. I want to work with a Hub Zone. I'll go into that Dynamic Small Business Search and see where those businesses are located, and call them up and say, this is my DUNS number. Maybe you want to partner. And if anybody does that, if you have a set aside and someone does call you, the very first thing you should do, rule of thumb, ask for their DUNS number and tell them, hey, you know what, I'll get back with you in 24 hours. And go into the FPDS, which is a Federal Procurement Data System, or usaspending.gov. These are historical data is stored in these free services, and they're .mil. They're secured. So you can find out if this person that's calling you has actually been awarded contracts, because you don't want somebody to partner with you because you're an attractive set-aside. Okay, and they also adjudicate protests of eligibility regarding the Hub Zone contracts, the SBA. Again, this is a set-aside that is 3% for government-wide prime and subcontracting goals. And also, they have a 10% price evaluation preference for, let's say like you and another larger company went for this project, and you wanted to submit your application. This prime might have a lower bid, but you get that 10% preference. You are more expensive, but they'll go with you because that's what they put into this this program. But keep in mind, when they do that, it has to be written into the clause of the contract that they're exercising that 10% price valuation preference. Okay, again, this is for small businesses. According to the SBA standards, you have to be a small business. You have to be owned and controlled by at least 51% of a citizen of the United States, or a development corporation, or an agricultural cooperative, or an Indian tribe. The principal office must be located in a designated hub zone. You can have other satellite offices, but where most of the people work should be in a hub zone. 35% of your employees should be live in a hub zone. And this is one of the more difficult set-asides to be compliant with, because the zones do change from time to time, and also people move. People decide they're going to go work to another place. So the best thing for this type of set-aside is to take excellent, print out everything. When you have a employee and you go into the hub zone map, at that time, print out that map for that employee. Take copies of his driver's license, utility bills. Get a 3-ring binder. Put everything in there so you'll have it, because the maps will change and you can't go back and say, oh, well, he was in it, but you just keep good record keeping for this. Again, 35% of the employees must reside in a hub zone, not necessarily the same one as the primary, but a hub zone. And but there's different rules. You see a note that apply for tribal governments, Alaska Native corporations, and the community developer corporations, and the small agricultural cooperatives. Okay. The SBA has a map, and you can Google it, or you go on the SBA website. SBA website is an excellent site. However, you have to bookmark it when you find something that you want to go back to, because it's like going down a rabbit hole. So much information. So the SBA is where you're going to go and type hub zone, and it'll take you here. And all you have to do is plug in your address, and it'll show you the plotting of the hub zone. And if you do question it, because time to time, you may want to take a look at the map and say, you know what, I think I fall into that area, because there may be a fine line. You can give them a call and see if this map is accurate, because sometimes there may be questionable lines where it might be gray. So you can always call the SBA, and John Veal with the SBA, call him.
And we also, on that website where we have the interactive maps for the enterprise zone 1 and 2, and the maps for the local incentive program, we also have a link to a GIS Portsmouth-based interactive map with the hub zone.
Okay, good. Okay, most successful hub zone firms plan their success, and that's why I say keep a notebook, document everything. And you might want to plan your strategy out, because, again, everybody has good intentions. I love my apartment, or I love my house, but things change. You might want to keep abreast of the lines of the designation, and also keep in mind there are other people out there that you could pull on board if somebody pivots out, because it's very easy to lose this compliance. And you have a contract, and you're trugging along, and all of a sudden somebody moves and you might be out of compliance. So keep an eye on the future. Might put that in your business plan. Okay, step 1 is you need to verify your eligibility compliance, and then gather what you need. So they're going to ask for a lot of different documentation for this for the subzone. They're going to ask for the employees, their voting, maybe their voting card, license, utility bills. They're also going to ask for the owner, back your taxes and a lease, the assigned lease. So make sure you go through the checklist. It's on the site, and if you want to give me your email, your cards, I can email all that information to you. Because I didn't bring this. I couldn't print them out yesterday. But I do have on my thumb drive the list of documentations that were required. But make sure you gather that before you start the process, because when you log into the GLS, it will time out within an hour. And so all the information that you have put in, you lose it. So make sure they have everything with you at the time you go through the motions of the process. And also, there is a sample HubZone application form with the radio buttons to yes or no, the binary response. So just go through that, and you can print it out, just kind of go through it before you actually sit down and go through it, since it's timed. And then just review and ask questions. Every Tuesday and every Thursday in Richmond, they have an hour question and answer session you can call into. And I have that number, and I'll be happy to give that to everyone if you need it. But John Veal, I think Cassandra Ziegler will be the ones that will hold that. And that's a good, have questions. You can call me, or you can, give them a call. Okay, access the SBA's general logins screen. The best thing to do, that would be probably the first thing that I do, is generate your credentials, your username and your password. So sometimes that system, I can be honest with you, is very quirky, and it'll cycle. So just be patient. My experience with that is it does cycle out, so just make sure that you get your credentials and your password ready to go before you start the whole system and getting your paperwork. Then you need to complete and submit the online application, and then you submit it, and then 2 weeks later they'll review it, and then they'll ask for your supporting documentation. Okay, so first you need to see, my small business, the SBA side standards. And then the business is directly owned and controlled, again, by 51% U.S. citizen. And then, again, the firm's principal office should be in a hub zone, and 35% of its employees reside in a designated hub zone. Again, checklist, there's that link, and I can send you this and you click on the link, but you can that's why I asked if everybody's in SAM, because if you're in SAM, you do have your DUNS number, you're pretty aware of what your NAICS codes are, and you need to have your business and personal federal taxes for the last 3 years. And by the way, if you don't have all of that, you may want to write a detailed letter of explanation as to why, because some people may say, oh, well, I've only been in business for 2 years. Well, do a detailed letter and let them know, this is why I don't have a 3-year back taxes. Business ownership documentation, your articles of incorporation, you're going to need that. Citizen documentation for owners. Again, NAICS codes, you probably already know what those are since you're in SAM. Proof of principal office location, such as a lease agreement, you'll have to have that. Then you're going to have payroll records, because the people that are in a hub zone, they have to work 40 hours a month. And they should be working at least a month before you go through this process. And you're going to have some kind of record of that, even if it's an Excel spreadsheet with that information. And then again, the information showing the employees residing in the hub zones. This is a driver's license, utility bills, voter card. Other information supporting hub zone eligibility requirements. They'll let you know specifically if they want further information. Okay, then you review, and then, again, this thing will time out. So what you don't know is what you don't know. So ask, review eligibility requirements, and call if you have any questions. Give me a call. But this is the GLS screen. That's what it looks like. And then it's pretty simple. You just click on there. And then it's just pretty simple. It walks you right through. And then when you submit, you just wait, and you'll get an email. And then 2 weeks later, in 2 week time frame, you send your information, those documents that they want. Does anybody have any questions? And that's my information. And couple things. At ODU, Coming up, I have a flyer. We're going to have a workshop on how to navigate more effectively through FedBizOps, because anything over 25K is going to be on FedBizOps, and anything under is just office level. But if you need to really figure out how to go through this this website, it's a good workshop. It's going to be for 2 days, and it's going to be on the 2nd and the 9th of April. And you can go on our website and register. And then coming up, and I don't have the flyer with me because we just signed this ink still wet on the contract for the other person that's going to be doing the stalking the wind. He's a federal investigator, and also he was a contracting officer, and he's going to be doing like an overarching how to use open source to find using FPDS and usaspending.gov, and also a part 2, which is a deeper dive. And so that's coming out, and I always send Mallory my flyers when I get them, so we'll send them around. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And again, as you can see, we have a variety of different incentive programs that are available throughout the city. Some are federal, some are port-related, some are downtown and midtown related, some are in conjunction with the State Enterprise Zone program. Surely there's a way to find something that may work for you and take advantage of it between the property you may own and the business that you may have that you might be able to take advantage of. With that, if there are any closing questions that anybody might have about anything, we will be again putting this up on our website in a couple of days after we've tweaked this, and in conjunction with that, we will put up a PDF of each of today's PowerPoints. There are a handful floating around if you did not pick up one today, and don't hesitate to call our office if you have a follow-up question on any of the topics, and we'll certainly try and get the answer for you or help you get back in touch with our speakers today. With that, thank you very much, and again, I appreciate your willingness to be crammed in here today.